I would have bet everything that riot was not going to happen. I said, there's not going to be a problem. The officers who beat Rodney King are going to be convicted and they're going to jail. And for those who don't know the history, 30 years ago, all those officers were found to be innocent. The city came unglued.
When the verdicts came out, it came out about this time, about in the morning is afternoonish. We were out here on Crenshaw and people were just beeping their horns and honking their horns, and it was like you can just tell the energy, but we never saw it. So when the riots happened, I actually went to First AME Church, and literally, when I went outside, it was like Beirut. Like, it was fires everywhere.
And it was kind of bad. So we didn't know what we were going to do, so we went back to our home and watched it on television.
And the way they stopped it, they called the army in. And they had the guns and things out, and they was riding around in them big trucks covered up, but you could see the guns sticking out in there. And that's what quieted it down. And the next morning when we got up, blood was running down the street like water. They shot up a lot of people that night. I know about that ride, I know about it.
I realized at that time that sometimes you don't have justice, you have just us. First of all, I started Operation Hope out of guilt for not showing up in my own neighborhood. I felt guilty, like I need to do something.
I thought he was just talking out of both sides of his mouth. I didn't take it seriously at first until he brought his executive secretary there and told me that they were going in business together. She said, I see something in him, and she's been with him day one up until now.
You know, think about these 24 and 26-year-olds, out there thinking they're going to change the world, with brochures and meetings and whatever we were doing at that age. It was just relentless every day, every day, every day.
My God, we made it happen. We make it happen how you make it happen. Flyers, word of mouth, whatever we could do. So we did a lot of grassroots, a lot of foot pounding, a lot of soldiering ourselves.
I could see the results. I could see people buying homes. I could see them opening bank accounts.
Starting to hear the stories of how people's lives were changing and how financial stability was, affording opportunities that people would not even have thought or dreamed of before.
My mother was able to purchase her first home in 1992. So at the time that my mom was introduced to Operation Hope and the program, she didn't think home ownership was possible for her. So for me personally, seeing that she actually went through the program, as it was introduced, it made me happy to know that her dreams was being realized at that time.
It used to be a time when I would say I work for Operation Hope and I would have to explain the mission and what we do. But now, when I say I work for Operation Hope, a lot of people know the organization and what we do and what our mission is, and they've heard a lot, and that feels good.
And I've done workshops on tarmacs. I've done workshops outside. I've done a workshop downtown Skid Row on a Tuesday, and I did a workshop to some rocket scientists on a Thursday in the same week.
Within these last, 4 years, it's sort of exploded in a way, sort of beyond even what, not that I couldn't believe that growth was going to happen, but it was just so fast.
If I commit that Operation Hope will become, I believe, the most important non-governmental civil society organization in this country.
Yeah, it really is incredible to hear some of the stories of the work that this organization, Operation Hope, has done. Let's give a round of applause celebrating 30 years. Really incredible. It really is amazing. I know I'm inspired after that last session, hearing just that one takeaway for me was I had the audacity to say my dream out loud. Don't you love that? I love that. That is so inspiring. We're going to keep the inspiration train going, so to speak, to talk about sports and entertainment. I know that for a lot of us in 2020, that was such a key part of what we remember, not only with the pandemic and how it affected sports and entertainment, but also with the social justice awakening that was happening across the country. That also permeated sports and entertainment. You just couldn't escape the conversation. It was all around us. We are going to explore some of that right now with some real champions of change. So if you could help me to welcome to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of RISE, Diane Billings Burford, the President of NASCAR, Steve Phelps, Operation Hope CEO John Hope Bryant, and joining us remotely, NBA Hall of Famer, TBS broadcaster, and founder of Hill Ventures, the legendary Grant Hill.
Welcome to the largest meeting of its kind in the world for the empowerment of the underserved and the poor and the working class. Folks with too much month at the end of their money. Oh, there's my man, Grant Hill. So Grant's so wealthy, he needed his own room. Good to see you, Grant.
Well, it's good to be here. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person.
No, we understand. They had a paycheck where you are right now. Grant's a straight-up capitalist. He don't play. But no, he's with us every year when he can be, and he cares deeply. He's also vice chairman of the Atlanta Hawks. Yes. And he's a father, and he's a husband, and he's a son. God bless your mother's soul. We pray for your whole family. Her legacy lives, brother. Her legacy lives. We have an incredible conversation here, and let me just say the obvious. The president and CEO of NASCAR is here. Now, for anybody living under a rock, you may not understand why that's all so important. But this man is a civil rights leader, as far as I'm concerned, a social justice leader for sure, because he's done really what he didn't really have to do. It would have been, some would say, in his best interest to leave the whole issue alone. You deserve the Nobel Peace Prize just for handling the Confederate flag.
Boom.
And then he leaned in and said, we need to support black drivers and diverse drivers. And then there was an incident, and he supported the people of color who were having issues and made sure there's complete investigations of things. And then he leaned in and made it clear that we want everybody at NASCAR. Everybody. In the stadiums, in the workplace, working in the crews, in the pits, driving the cars. This has to be a sport for the future. And he decided to plant a flag and make it so. It was an extraordinary mark of leadership. And I was so impressed with him right before a hurricane was being announced in Florida. I flew in, and I think I missed the hurricane by 6 hours. I flew in because I could have dinner with Steve, and I just wanted to meet this this wonderful human being for myself. And I was late because of no fault of my own, with the plane, whatever, you waited, you were gracious, you were humble in your spirit, but bold in your character. Steve, help us understand the human being that drives these decisions.
Well, let me start with this, John. It's great to be here. This is an incredible opportunity for us to talk about our sport. I'm not great about talking about myself. I'm on Diane's board. I'm on John's board. It's great to be making a difference. I think if you think about where NASCAR was in June of 2020 and where the country was, obviously during a pandemic, our first goal when we started 2020 was to bring two companies together, a public company and a private company that merged to become one company called NASCAR. Then the pandemic hit, we shut down, and we wanted to try to figure out how we would be the first sport back to competing, which is what we did. So on May 18th, we were the first major sport to come back to compete, and we competed initially without fans, and then a month later we started to bring our fans back. So to some people, that was the accomplishment of 2020. To me, the accomplishment of 2020, and for the rest of NASCAR's history, really what happened in June of 2020. The banning of the Confederate flag. Actually, before that, the stance that our sport, not me personally, our sport, our drivers, our community took after the death of George Floyd and the reckoning that happened, we needed to be part of that. And I think it surprised people. The banning of the flag itself was the major impediment to growth to people of color. It was an important and intentional thing that my management team did in order to lift the barriers that would exist to having people feel welcoming into our sport. And that was important. I think, and no hyperbole at all, this Wednesday, the 14th, will be the 75th anniversary of the founding of NASCAR by Bill France Sr. That was the single most important thing to our sport. The second most important moment in our sport is what happened in June of 2020. I believe that to be true.
Wow.
Because we open up the aperture to a brand new set of fans, brand new set of owners, Michael Jordan, Pitbull, and others who are saying, hey, this sport's for me. And that was the most surprising thing. And I think, and again, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but people would say, well, if NASCAR can do it, can't anyone do it? And I think that's a a fair point. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but and thank you for your kind words.
No, I just think that change is difficult. I mean, nothing good comes easy. Diane would know that. She's running a group, an association, which is like herding cats. You're trying to get everybody to move forward, but you have influence but not power. And in some ways, you're doing the same thing in the sense that you can't, Steve, change people's values. You can change policies and procedures, and you hope the values come along for the ride. And I think you've done a good job of making the case that this is good for everybody. But it's messy work. And I think people don't understand, and I want to pivot. We're going to pivot from the past to the present and the future. And Diane, I want to bring you in this conversation. Grant, bring you in this conversation as we talk about the role of sports in not only business, but social justice. Yeah. But for those who don't know the history of NASCAR, I actually will talk about, when I go in the inner cities, we're running credit scores now in every zip code in America. You tell me your credit score, do our community credit score index, I'll tell you how you're living. And we found that low-income credit score neighborhoods have a credit score below 600, high-income credit score neighborhood above 700. You live 20 years longer in a 700 credit score neighborhood than a 600 credit score neighborhood. And what I've said is that these drug dealers in a low-wealth neighborhood, yes, it's illegal. Yes, it's immoral. Yes, I'm completely against it. Yes, it has to change. But what these drug dealers are not is dumb. They understand import, export, finance, marketing, wholesale, retail, customer service, security, territory, logistics. They are frustrated entrepreneurs with a bad business plan. And the gang leaders are frustrated union organizers. It's management ability. Why am I making that analogy? Because where did NASCAR come from? NASCAR came from moonshine runners in the Appalachian Mountains who were good at driving and something else. The something else was illegal and was not sustainable. And they decided to take the skill that was sustainable, apply it to something that had commerce attached to it. Originally, as I understand, Steve, they raced on the beaches and then on dirt tracks. And those became brands that were respectable, and those families, many of which are now legacy families today, and now NASCAR is this respectable brand around the world and a multi-billion-dollar business, but it came from a very humble place. Have I gotten this right so far?
Yeah, you got it right.
And if we can do that with NASCAR and moonshine runners generations ago in the Appalachian Mountains who happen to be white and poor, Can't we find a meaningful, positive role for black and brown folks in inner cities who have talent and gifts but have not been mainstreamed? I think that we can come up together. We have to change the lens and change the narrative and don't be so punitive to people. A saint is a sinner that got up. Diane, talk to us about how you're trying to bring all this together in one narrative. And then I'm going to go to Grant with a provocative question about his career in sport and the role of sports.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Same, I'm learning a lot, so I thank everyone for my education today. You know, I have the pleasure of heading RISE, and RISE is a national not-for-profit, and our mission is to educate and empower the sports community, but to do a pretty specific thing, which is to eliminate racism, to promote social justice, and to improve race relations. And so I have been incredibly excited. I think Steve came on as president of NASCAR the same year I came on as CEO of RISE.
2020?
No, sorry. 2018.
2018.
And, you know, we've been cooking up something.
So this is before George Floyd?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You've been doing this, okay.
Absolutely, right? And one thing I think is important, you know, I always start with is there has been a history in this country of sport and social justice. It's not anything new, right? So when we have these conversations about shut up and dribble, and is there a place for social justice in sport, even to have that conversation is to ignore history, is to be ignorant of how America has developed. And so one of the things that RISE does, we have a fan activation, and we show over the 100 years of the road to progress is what we call it. Bill Russell, you know, God rest his soul, he actually had the first integrated camp, basketball camp in Mississippi in direct response to the assassination of Medgar Evers. There is nothing new. Thank you. There's nothing new about the connection between sport and social justice. And so one of the things RISE seeks to do is take that power of sport and figure out how do you educate and empower this community so that it continues to play that role in our society. And I think we do a pretty great job of it. I will turn back to Steve and say, one of the things he left out is not only did him and his management team make that decision about the Confederate flag, but when George Floyd was murdered, I hosted a town hall with Steve and members of his staff. And really, he provided this opportunity for, as an organization, for them to reckon with history, where they were, and start to develop where they wanted to go and what they wanted to become. And so one of the things I do think it's important to say, if NASCAR can do this work, anyone can, but it's incredibly important to understand you have to have the right leader. Without the right leader, you're not going to see this movement.
That's right. That's right.
So Steve hates compliments, but I don't care. But you have to have an inclusive leader, and that's something that we are trying to help the leadership in sport to understand as well.
And you have other prominent members on your board. Real quickly, what are a couple of the others?
Well, all the major leagues, so the NFL, the NBA, MLS,
Major League Baseball.
Major League
Baseball.
NHL.
NHL.
I'm trying to help.
And NHL is very prominent. USATF, USA Track and Field.
Right.
And also the sports media companies, so NBC Sports, CBS Sports, Fox Sports, Turner, and ESPN.
So you've got the whole conglomerate of leaders on your board. Steve, last source of embarrassment for you. How'd you get so decent? And I'm not giving you false praise. Like, beyond what we're talking about here, you went and hired what I call the director of inclusion. That's not his title. But Brandon Thompson is a Clark Atlanta University alumni, right here in Atlanta. Absolutely. He's proud. But you've gone broad, deep, wide, and you've actually gotten the support of the family who controlled NASCAR. They're with this to you now. But this comes, I think, from a place deep inside of you. Just very quickly, where does this decency come from?
My mother. God rest her soul. You know, I just, I'm not good at this part. So I would say, you know, back to Diane's piece, because I think it's meaningful, and you think about the banning of the flag, which seems, why didn't you do it earlier? And that's a fair point. I think it was when we banned the flag and the stance on social justice, really, the moment was there. And I was struck by, when Diane came to do the town hall with us, we had 4 or 5 different people tell their story. I had one of my employees come to me, and she was concerned about this would be a bad idea for our sport to ban the flag because she didn't understand. And Diane brought out these stories, you know, from these people who were on the town hall, and they all told this story about what it was like to work at NASCAR, a place that they loved, Brandon Thompson, and told the story of how they would have to talk to their family and friends about working at NASCAR, and they're like, we don't get it. You work for a racist organization. Like, no, I don't. I work for a caring organization that are made up of like-minded people who love NASCAR. And after she told these stories, this woman who didn't understand why we banned the Confederate flag, she sent me an email. She's like, I totally get it now. This was the right thing to do because of the decency and creating opportunities for people of color to come to our sport. And what I would say is, my management team and I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to grow the sport of NASCAR, but probably not as quickly as it happened. It's been, you look at our numbers on television, people who consider themselves fans of the sport today versus where we were 2.5 years ago, it's unbelievable.
Did you just say this is good for business?
It's good for
Excellent
business.
for business.
Social justice through an economic lens. And now this is a great pivot to you, Grant, because you've been really good at balancing doing well and doing good at the same time. I know you're going to give credit to your mom and your dad as sort of the fiber of this, which is beautiful and deserving, but you deserve credit too, as humble as you are. Talk a little bit about the history of sports in civil rights and social justice work. I think it goes back to the 60s at least, maybe even before that. Talk about where you see the appropriateness. Some people say shut up and dribble, which I disagree with. The appropriateness today. Also, you're on the balance sheet side. You become an investor and a business person, which has allowed you to have not only more than a voice, but a hand in social justice. And mention your wife and how that, her influence or her experience in entertainment has maybe influenced how you see the lens of how sports and entertainment and social justice might blend together.
Yeah, John. I think first of all, before I was a capitalist, as you mentioned, I was a history major. And first, I appreciate the history lesson on NASCAR, which I didn't know. But in studying history in school, you learn about ancient civilizations. And I think of the ancient Greeks and how they understood the power of sport. They would halt wars in the years of Olympics because they understood that sport can bring people together, it can inspire, it does so many things for the morale of a people. And so as we fast forward to present day, that relationship that we have with sport is incredibly powerful and strong. And as you talked about, and certainly was mentioned earlier, in the 60s, the civil rights movement, we think of Dr. Young, Ambassador Young, Martin Luther King, and all the other great civil rights heroes, but there were athletes who played an important role. Bill Russell, who just recently passed, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the late Muhammad Ali, using their platform and understanding the value of their voice to affect change. And so that has been in play for quite some time. I think as we sort of fast forward to my era in the 90s, I don't think we were as strong with our voice. And I like to say that technology, which has come in the last 20 years, has really, I think, played a role in helping to facilitate that message with the modern athlete. Be able to access information, to be able to distribute that information and share that with your network, with your platform, with the entire world. I'm really in awe of the modern athlete and how they are unafraid and feel a calling, almost a mission of sorts, to speak to injustices anywhere. I think back when I was in Detroit in the mid '90s. If something happened in Toledo, Ohio, which was 60 miles down the road, it's not that you weren't aware of it, but it was hard to really gather that information and then to have a vehicle to share that with the world. And so I'm not making an excuse for my generation, but just sort of understanding how things evolve and change. And so when you think of what happened 2 years ago, the summer of 2020, and really the symbolic nature of it happening in the year 2020. 2020 is perfect vision. And now we got a chance to really see everything. It took a global pandemic for all of us to kind of be still and to really see what was happening. And it opened a lot of our eyes and realized that we must make change, not just in terms of in the world of sport, not just in the NBA, not just in NASCAR, but in corporate America, in finance. I think we're having these discussions and moving the needle forward. And so, look, I like to feel like in the NBA, we're very progressive. We have 15 African-American head coaches. We have people of color, women in leadership roles and within the NBA and franchises and also at the league level. But there's still room for growth. And our commissioner, Adam Silver, has said that publicly, would say it now. We still need to push forward and be more diverse, more inclusive, and really try to be leaders in the world of sport. As I talk, sports and entertainment has really merged. And my wife, who's a singer, Tamia, she's certainly my better half and certainly the real star of our family. But the power of those two platforms, the emotional connection that we have with athletes and that we have with our favorite singer, our favorite actor, our favorite entertainer is really quite powerful. And it's really something I'm proud that being a part of that community, that athletes, entertainers, people who are celebrities are using their voice to ultimately impact and affect change.
So if I'm hearing you properly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Grant, I'm hearing you say, because some people, some celebrities, some sports figures say, look, I'm an athlete or I'm a celebrity, I'm not a moral leader, I'm not a role model, don't put that on me. What I'm hearing you say is celebrity, professional sports, entertainment, and business, you can do those things and you can also and should be a voice for positive social change. Am I putting words in your mouth or is that what I'm hearing?
No, you're absolutely correct. Look, we all pay taxes and some of us pay a lot of taxes and we have the opportunity to vote. And so as a result, I think what comes with that is the opportunity to speak to social injustices. The only thing I encourage anyone is just to make sure you're informed, to make sure that you've done the proper investigation, you've read up on it. But yeah, no, I think everyone as an American, as a taxpayer, we that's part of the freedom, freedom that we have is to be able to speak out and speak up when necessary.
So recently, I had the opportunity to bring, it was a billionaire came by the house, happened to run a big company, and Mason Dalton Bryant at the house, he shook his hand, yeah, okay, nice to meet you. But when he heard that I had Grant Hill on the phone, it all fell apart. He said, oh my, no, now John Bryant, you're doing something. According to him, you're one of the 10 or 20 best NBA players in the history of all basketball. And I just want to give you your flowers and say thank you for being a leader who cares.
Oh, well, thank you for those kind words. And clearly you have good friends.
Ladies and gentlemen, Grant, Diane, Steve, changing America. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Thank you.
so many of our people can use the financial literacy, education, know-how, training to improve their own security and the awareness and the tools that you're providing.
There is at least 1/3 of our Delta people who have experienced some type of financial challenge, and as a result it has created some type of a mental stress. So we also can appreciate and connect the connection between financial wellness and overall wellness for all of ourselves and our families.
We deal with everyone from senior management on down to ramp agents, and the one common denominator is going to be a budget. And being on a budget is kind of like a roadmap. It's going to let you know, it's going to be a guide as to where your finances are and where there's some opportunities.
Consider this like Oprah on money when you're talking to our coaches. It's really a no blame, no fault environment. It's just unpacking your life and repacking it with success as part of the plan.
We appreciate all you do. Financial health affects your mental and emotional well-being, it affects your physical well-being, and it's all part of us doing more to our total well-being at Delta to help us be the best we can be every day.